A 5-year-old girl was tossed aside like garbage at the door of a fancy restaurant, but as all seemed lost, a millionaire witnessed the scene from inside. What happened next would forever change their destinies, revealing a secret that would shake even the coldest hearts. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories every day. The December rain fell relentlessly on the city, turning the streets into dark mirrors reflecting the lights of the neon signs. Inside the restaurant, Le Bernardin, the atmosphere was completely opposite to the chaos outside. Golden crystals hung from the very high ceiling, classical music echoed softly between the marble tables, and the aroma of white truffle and French wine enveloped the few customers who could afford $300 for a plate. Sitting at the corner table, always the same one for 3 years, was the most feared man on the American financial market. His long, precise fingers methodically cut a perfectly cooked steak, while his grey eyes remained fixed on his cell phone screen. Numbers, always numbers, stocks rising, contracts closing, investments multiplying his already immeasurable fortune. He chewed without haste, without pleasure, like someone fulfilling a biological obligation. At 42 years old, he had built an empire that began with a small brokerage firm inherited from his father. Now he controlled banks, construction companies, hotel chains. His signature on a document could make or break entire careers. But all this power came at a price that few knew. Since the tragedy that took his only wife and daughter 3 years prior, he had become a ghost version of himself. The helicopter accident that took them during a vacation trip to Switzerland was not just a personal loss. It was the end of the only human part that still remained in him. After the funeral, he moved to a glass and steel penthouse in the city center, sold the family house in the countryside, fired old employees who insisted on asking how he was feeling. Feelings were luxuries he could no longer afford. The waiter discreetly approached to remove the untouched plate. As always, he ate only enough to keep his body functioning. Flavor was another sensation that had died along with his family. It was then that he heard it. Outside, a soft sound, almost imperceptible amidst the noise of the rain. A murmur, a child's voice. His eyes lifted from the cell phone screen for the first time that night. Through the fogged glass of the front door, he could make out a small silhouette. A child, barefoot, soaked. The rain had plastered her brown hair to her thin face, and her clothes, a faded t-shirt and a worn skirt, clung to her frail body like a wet second skin. The girl wasn't trying to enter. She was just stretching a small, dirty hand through the crack in the door, as if asking for permission to exist in that space. Her big dark eyes didn't see the luxury inside. They were just looking for something that he took a while to understand. A look of recognition. A sign that someone saw her. The child's stomach rumbled loudly enough to be heard over the ambient music. She pressed her small hand against her belly, trying to silence the hunger that gnawed at her. Her lips moved in inaudible whispers, as if apologizing for daring to feel basic needs. The millionaire found himself observing every detail of that scene, the way she hunched her shoulders to protect herself from the cold, how her thin legs trembled inside the soaked skirt, how she looked with hope at each person who passed on the sidewalk, only to lower her head when no one noticed her. It was an image that completely contrasted with the controlled and predictable world he had built for himself. A raw and undeniable reality that no investment could solve, no contract could avoid. Without realizing it, his fingers had stopped sliding across the cell phone screen. For the first time in 3 years, something other than numbers completely occupied his attention. The girl remained there, standing in the rain, extending her small hand like someone offering her own vulnerability to the world. And the world, represented by the people who hurried by with colorful umbrellas, simply ignored her existence. He should go back to reading the financial reports. He should finish dinner and go home. He should maintain the routine that protected him from feeling anything that could hurt. But he couldn't stop looking at her. The restaurant security guard was a tall, burly man, hired precisely to keep undesirable elements away from the refined clientele. He had noticed the girl a few minutes ago, and his patience had reached its limit. For him, that dirty child represented everything the establishment did not want associated with its image: poverty, despair, a reality too harsh for those who paid a high price for a perfect experience. With firm steps, he headed to the front door. The millionaire watched every move, sensing what was about to happen. His muscles tensed involuntarily, a reflex he hadn't felt in years. "Get out of here, girl! You're bothering the customers!" roared the security guard, opening the door just enough for his authoritarian voice to reach the child. The girl immediately recoiled, stumbling over her own bare feet. Her small hands went up in a defensive gesture that revealed painful familiarity with rejection. "I'm not doing anything wrong, mister. I'm just hungry," she murmured, her voice almost swallowed by the sound of the rain. "Hunger is your problem. This isn't a place for beggars." The words hit the girl like physical punches. She lowered her head, and the millionaire could see her small, trembling hands trying to wipe away the tears that mixed with the rainwater on her face. "I'm sorry, mister. I'll leave now." That's when it happened. The security guard, impatient with the child's delay in moving away, extended his foot and pushed her with force. The movement was calculated, cruel, intended to humiliate as much as to push her away. The girl lost her balance and fell to her knees in the gutter, where the dirty rainwater had accumulated, along with dead leaves and urban debris. The impact against the rough asphalt opened a deep cut on her right knee. Fresh blood began to flow, mixing with the mud that clung to her skin. She let out a low groan of pain, but even then murmured, sorry for bothering." At that moment, something inside the millionaire's chest broke. It wasn't a gradual or subtle feeling. It was as if a dam he had carefully sealed for the past 3 years had broken all at once. The image of the girl fallen in the gutter, apologizing for existing, for being hungry, for daring to occupy a space in the world, unleashed a torrent of emotions he thought were dead. Without thinking, without calculating, without considering the consequences, he stood up. The leather chair scraped against the wooden floor. The other restaurant customers turned, surprised by the sudden movement of the man who always dined in sepulchral silence. The waiter, approaching with the check, froze mid-stride. He didn't say a word. He simply walked towards the door, his Italian shoes echoing against the floor like a declaration of war. "Sir?" called the maitre d', confused. "Is something wrong?" He completely ignored the question. He opened the restaurant door and went straight out into the torrential rain. Within seconds, his $3,000 suit was soaked, his perfectly combed hair dripping water down his eyes. The girl was still kneeling in the gutter, trying to get up on her own. Her small hands pressed against her injured knee, trying to stop the blood that wouldn't stop flowing. She was trembling violently, both from the cold and from the shock of what had just happened. When she saw the expensive shoes approaching, she shrank further, expecting another kick, another humiliation. "Please don't hit me," she whispered, her voice choked. "I promise I'll leave." But instead of the expected violence, she felt something warm and dry being placed over her thin shoulders. The suit jacket, still warm from his body, wrapped around her like a protective embrace. She looked up, surprised, and met the saddest gaze she had ever seen in her life. They were grey eyes like the rain, but they carried a pain that she recognized immediately. The pain of someone who also felt lost in the world. "You shouldn't be alone," he said, his hoarse voice breaking the silence of the rain. For the first time that night, the girl smiled. A small, shy, but genuine smile. "You're alone too," she observed, with the hauntingly sharp perception of children who grow up on the streets. He extended his hand, and after a hesitation that seemed to last an eternity, she took it. The private hospital where he took her shone with the white marble asepsis and the characteristic smell of expensive disinfectant. The nurses stared in astonishment when they saw the most powerful millionaire in the city entering soaked, carrying a dirty girl in his arms, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "She needs medical attention," he told the receptionist, who took a few seconds to react. "Now." While the doctors cleaned and bandaged the girl's knee, he remained seated in the waiting room, still in his wet clothes, ignoring the curious glances of the staff. His cell phone rang incessantly. Lawyers, secretaries, business partners who couldn't reach him at the meeting that had been scheduled for that night. He didn't answer any calls. The girl left the doctor's office with her knee bandaged and clean clothes that a kind nurse had found in the hospital's donation stock. She walked slowly, still distrustful, but her eyes shone with a gratitude that he didn't know how to interpret. "What's your name?" he asked in the elevator that was taking them back to the ground floor. "Everyone just calls me Girl," she replied, shrugging. "I forgot my real name. It's been a long time since anyone used it." The answer hit him like a punch to the gut. A 5-year-old child who had forgotten her own name due to lack of use. In the car, a black BMW that cost more than many houses, she sat on the leather seat with reverent care, as if afraid of soiling something so beautiful. Throughout the journey to the municipal shelter where she said she sometimes slept, she remained silent, watching the city lights through the glass. "Why did you help me?" she asked when they were arriving at their destination. He took a long time to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice came out lower than he intended. "I don't know." It was the first completely honest answer he had given in 3 years. The shelter was a grey, peeling building that smelled of mold and cheap disinfectant. The director, a middle-aged woman with a tired look, welcomed the girl back with relief mixed with surprise at seeing who was accompanying her. "She ran away again this morning," the woman explained. "We have 43 children here, sir. It's impossible to watch them all the time." "She didn't run away," he corrected, with a firmness that surprised even himself. "She was looking for food." "Sir, you don't understand how these children work. They are manipulative. They know how to arouse pity in people. She probably made up a sad story to get what?" he interrupted, his voice carrying the coldness he used in negotiations. "A plate of food? A bandage on her knee? Is that what you call manipulation?" The director backed down, intimidated, but insisted, "Sir, you seem to be an important person. I suggest you don't get involved in cases like this. These children have complex problems, dysfunctional families, traumas. It's not something that money can solve." He looked at the girl, who watched the conversation with her eyes downcast, as if she already expected to be rejected again. Something inside him revolted against that premature resignation. "I'll visit her tomorrow," he announced, surprising everyone, including himself. "Sir, that's not advisable. It will create false expectations in the child." "At 2 in the afternoon, he cut her off. "Prepare the visitation papers." During the drive home, he tried to rationalize what he had just done. He was a logical, calculating man. He didn't make impulsive decisions. He didn't get emotionally involved in situations he couldn't completely control. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw the girl's face when she fell in the gutter. He heard her voice whispering, "Sorry for being hungry." He felt the minimum weight of her body when he carried her to the hospital. At home, he changed clothes and tried to concentrate on the reports he had ignored throughout the night. The numbers danced on the screen without making sense. His mind obsessively returned to the girl sleeping in an overcrowded shelter, surrounded by other abandoned children, dreaming perhaps of the only adult who had treated her with kindness in a long time. "It's just pity," he said to himself out loud, as if verbalizing the thought would make it true. "Tomorrow I'll take some things for her, and that's it. End of story." But even as he spoke, he knew he was lying. The next morning, he found himself doing something he hadn't done in years, buying toys. The store was enormous, filled with vibrant colors and electronic sounds that left him slightly dizzy. There were talking dolls, transforming cars, educational games with cutting-edge technology. But he stopped in front of a simple shelf where some illustrated children's books were displayed. He picked up a copy of The Little Match Girl and flipped through the colorful pages, vaguely remembering reading the same story to his daughter years ago. "Can I help you?" asked a smiling saleswoman. "I'm looking for something for a 5-year-old girl," he said, feeling strangely out of place among so many children's products. "Does she like dolls? Games? What kind of personality does she have?" He realized he didn't know how to answer. He didn't know the girl's tastes, her dreams, her favorite games. He only knew that she was hungry, cold, and had a surprising ability to apologize for things that weren't her fault. "Something simple," he finally said. "And maybe clothes. She needs clothes." 2 hours later, he arrived at the shelter with 3 full bags. New clothes, shoes of the right size, some illustrated books, crayons, and paper to draw. Nothing too extravagant, but basic items that any child should have. The girl was sitting alone in the shelter's inner courtyard, watching other children play. When she saw him approaching, her face lit up with a smile so genuine that he felt a strange pang in his chest. "You came back," she said, as if it were the most surprising thing in the world. "I promised I would." "Adults say a lot of things," she replied with a sad wisdom. "But you're different, right?" He sat down beside her on the concrete bench, placing the bags between them. "I brought you some things." The girl's eyes widened when she saw the new clothes, the shoes that shone in the sun, the colorful books. But she didn't move to take anything. "Is it for me?" she asked suspiciously. "It's yours." "But I can't pay." "You don't need to pay, they're gifts." She delicately touched a pink t-shirt with butterfly designs, as if she feared it would disappear at the slightest sudden movement. "No one's ever given me a gift," she whispered. "Never," she shook her head. "I only got things from the trash, old clothes, food that others didn't want, but a real gift, chosen just for me." Her voice choked. "Can I hug you?" He stiffened for a moment. He hadn't received hugs since his family's death. He no longer knew how to respond to spontaneous displays of affection. But before he could think of an answer, she had already approached and wrapped her small arms around his neck. It was a tight, desperate hug, as if she wanted to keep that moment forever. "Thank you," she murmured against his shoulder. "Thank you for remembering that I exist." Something inside him completely shattered. In the days that followed, he established a routine that surprised everyone around him. Every afternoon at 2 o'clock, he was at the shelter. He brought books and read to her. He listened to her stories about life on the streets, her surprisingly profound observations about the adult world, her simple but touching dreams. "My dream is to have a roof that's just mine," she told him one day, while drawing with the crayons he had brought. "It doesn't have to be big. Just a little corner where I can lie down and know that no one will send me away." "And what else do you dream about?" "I dream of having a name that someone says with affection. You know how mothers call their children when they're not angry? Like Sweetie," she demonstrated, speaking her own forgotten name with an imaginary tenderness that broke his heart. "I dream of having a family that doesn't think I'm a nuisance. And I dream of being able to help other children like me who are also alone." Each story, each shared dream, each spontaneous smile of the girl seeped into the cracks of the emotional armor he had built around his heart. He was starting to feel again, and that terrified him as much as it comforted him. At night, alone in his glass penthouse, he found himself thinking about her. He wondered if she was sleeping well, if she had eaten enough, if she was afraid in the dark. For the first time in 3 years, he could no longer imagine his life without those daily meetings. 3 weeks after their first meeting, the routine had become something sacred to both of them. He had completely reorganized his schedule to ensure that nothing interfered with the afternoon visits. Meetings were moved, trips were cancelled, social engagements were ignored. His secretary, an efficient 50-year-old woman who had worked with him for a decade, couldn't hide her concern. "Sir, the board members are starting to ask questions," she said one day, while he was flipping through a catalogue of children's books instead of analysing investment proposals. "Your presence has been irregular, and there are rumours." "What kind of rumours?" "About your visits to the municipal shelter. People are speculating about your motivations." He raised his eyes from the catalogue, and she saw in them a glow that hadn't been there for years. And what would those motivations be, in the opinion of the people? "Well, some think you're going through some kind of midlife crisis. Others suggest it might be a marketing strategy to improve the company's image. And there are those who question whether it's appropriate for a single man to be so interested in a child." The silence that followed was cutting. He closed the catalogue slowly, and when he spoke, his voice carried the same icy tone he used to destroy competitors. "Tell the board members that my personal activities are none of their business. And if anyone dares to insinuate anything inappropriate about my relationship with that girl, I will sue for defamation and destroy that person's reputation so completely that they will never be able to work in this city again." The secretary backed down, intimidated. "Yes, sir, and I want you to research the best adoption lawyers, discreetly." She widened her eyes. "Sir, you heard what I said." But the obstacles didn't stop there. At the shelter, the director was increasingly hostile to his visits. She had created absurd rules, limited time, constant supervision, a ban on bringing gifts without prior authorization. "You are creating a bond that is harmful to the child," she argued during a tense conversation. "She is getting too attached. When you get tired of this philanthropic phase and stop coming, the trauma of abandonment will be devastating." "And if I don't stop coming?" "Men like you don't adopt troubled children from shelters. You make donations, pose for photos, and then go back to your normal lives." Troubled children. She has a history of running away, antisocial behavior, and difficulties adapting. She's not an easy child. She's 5 years old and was abandoned to die on the streets. If she has difficulties adapting, it's because the world taught her that she can't trust anyone. The tension reached its peak when he discovered that the director had begun to drastically limit the time he could spend with the girl. From 2 hours a day, it went to 1 hour, then half an hour, always with the justification of protecting the emotional well-being of the child. It was during one of these limited visits that the girl told him about her nightmares. "I dream that you stop coming," she confessed, drawing with crayons on paper that had already been used several times. "I dream that I wake up and no one remembers that I exist again. That won't happen. Promise?" He looked into her confident eyes and felt the weight of the responsibility he had assumed. "I promise." "Auntie Director said that you're going to get tired of me. That important men don't become friends with girls like me." The rage he felt at that moment was more intense than any emotion he had experienced in years. "Auntie Director is wrong? Then why doesn't she let you stay with me for a long time anymore?" He didn't know how to answer without scaring the child with the truth, that there were forces working against them, that the world didn't approve of bonds that defied social conventions, that he would have to fight to keep the promise he had just made. That night, he called the best family lawyer in the city. "I want to adopt a child," he said bluntly. "Congratulations, sir. That's a wonderful decision. Have you already chosen an agency? There are waiting lists for babies, but I can speed up the process." "It's not a baby. It's a 5-year-old girl who's at the municipal shelter." The silence on the other end of the line was revealing. "Sir, I need to be frank with you. Adoptions of older children are more complicated. And considering your situation, a single man wanting to adopt a girl, that will raise questions. What kind of questions? The court will want to understand your motivations. They will investigate your history, your emotional stability, your ability to raise a child on your own. And the fact that you haven't been in a relationship with anyone since your wife's death will raise questions about your mental health. My mental health is perfect. Perhaps we should consider other options. Being a godfather, a temporary guardian. No. I want full adoption. Then we have a battle ahead of us. The adoption process was like navigating an emotional minefield. Social workers scrutinized every aspect of his life. Psychologists questioned his motivations. Bureaucrats created obstacles where they didn't exist. Each visit to the shelter was monitored. Each interaction with the girl was analyzed. Each gift was viewed with suspicion. It was during one of these mandatory evaluations that the social worker asked the question that would change everything. "Sir, our records show that you lost a daughter 3 years ago. Would you like to talk about it?" He stiffened in his chair. It was the first time that someone had directly mentioned his loss since the beginning of the process. "I don't see the relevance." "With all due respect, it's very relevant. Traumatic losses can influence important decisions. It's possible that you are trying to replace—" "I'm not trying to replace anyone." His voice came out sharper than he intended. "Then help me understand. Why this specific child? What drew you to her?" He closed his eyes and saw the scene in the rain again. The girl falling in the gutter, apologizing for existing. The silent despair that he recognized because it also lived within him. "She was being treated like trash," he finally said, "and no one cared. And that touched you because I know what it's like to feel invisible." The social worker jotted something down on her clipboard. "You feel invisible?" "Since my family died, yes. I exist only in numbers, contracts, business decisions. No one really sees me. And she was literally invisible to the world." "And when did you see her?" "I felt alive again." It was after this session that he decided to hire a private investigator. If the system wanted to question his motivations, he would provide all possible information about the girl. Perhaps finding out more about her past would help in the adoption process. The investigator was a discreet and efficient man, specializing in sensitive cases involving families and missing children. 3 days later, he received the report in a sealed envelope delivered personally to his office. "Sir, I need to warn you that what I found is unusual," said the investigator, visibly uncomfortable. "Perhaps you'd like to sit down before reading." He picked up the envelope with some impatience. He expected to find information about the girl's biological parents, perhaps some medical or family history that would explain how she had ended up on the streets. He didn't expect the first page to contain a photograph that made his heart stop. It was a newspaper photo from 5 years ago. A young woman of 18 smiled at the camera at a high school graduation party. The caption read, "Daughter of businessman celebrates graduation from elite school." The young woman in the photo was his daughter. With trembling hands, he continued reading. The report was meticulous, detailed, constructed with the precision of someone who knew they were dealing with explosive information. His daughter, in the last months of her life, had been in a secret relationship with a 19-year-old man who worked as a groundskeeper on the family property. The relationship was discovered only after her death, when the young man sought out the family to say that she was pregnant when she died. "He left town 2 days after telling this to your wife," the report continued. "He received a sum of money and was instructed never to contact the family again. There are no records of where he went. The millionaire felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. His wife had known about the pregnancy and hadn't told him. She had paid the young man to disappear and taken the secret to the grave." But the report continued, and each line was a revelation more shocking than the last. The child was born prematurely in a public hospital 3 months after the accident. The young man had disappeared, and the baby's only identification was a paper found with her with the deceased mother's name. As there was no known family willing to take responsibility, the child went directly into the adoption system. All returned her to the system due to difficulties adapting. 2 years ago, she ran away from the last foster family and disappeared on the streets. Now he understood why she had forgotten her own name, why she apologized for existing, why she accepted rejection as if it were natural. His granddaughter had been repeatedly rejected by families who should have loved her. She had grown up believing she didn't deserve love, that she was a burden, that her existence was an inconvenience. The last page of the report contained a copy of the birth certificate, mother's name, his deceased daughter. Father's name, the young man who had been kicked out of town. Child's name, a name he recognized immediately. It was the name his daughter had chosen years ago for her favorite childhood doll. The name she said she would give her first daughter when she grew up. He dropped the report and ran to the office bathroom, where he vomited violently. The guilt he felt at that moment was physical, overwhelming. While his granddaughter was growing up being rejected by strangers, while she learned on the streets that love was something that didn't exist for children like her, he was in his glass tower, lamenting his own loneliness. When he managed to compose himself, he immediately called the lawyer. "I want a DNA test," he said without preamble. "Sir?" "For what?" "Just arrange it." "Urgent." "But sir, it's not necessary for the adoption process." "It's not for the adoption process." 3 days later, he had the result in hand, 99.7% genetic compatibility. The girl he had found fallen in the gutter, apologizing for being hungry, was his biological granddaughter. His own flesh and blood had been tossed aside like garbage at the door of his restaurant, and he had almost done nothing. That night, alone in his penthouse, he cried for the first time since his family's funeral. He cried for the daughter who had died carrying secrets. He cried for the granddaughter who had grown up without knowing she had a family. He cried for all the lost years, for all the nights she had slept in shelters or on the streets while he slept in silk sheets. But mostly, he cried with gratitude. Because fate or providence or simply chance had made her be in that exact place, on that exact night, at the door of the restaurant where he had dined every night for 3 years. She had come to him. His granddaughter had found her way back home. Now he needed to tell her the truth, and to hope that 5 years of abandonment hadn't completely destroyed her ability to trust in family bonds. The day after discovering the truth, he arrived at the shelter with a mixture of nervousness and determination that he hadn't felt since he decided to ask his wife to marry him decades ago. He carried a file of documents that would change both their lives forever. The girl was in the same place as always, sitting alone in the courtyard, watching other children play. When she saw him approaching, her face lit up with the smile that had become the best part of his days. "Hi, mister," she said, using the affectionate address that she had spontaneously adopted. "You're different today. You look like you have something important to say." Her sharp perception always surprised him. Children who grow up in abandonment develop a special ability to read expressions, anticipate moods, and detect changes in the behavior of adults. It's a matter of survival. "I do," he confirmed, sitting down beside her on the concrete bench. "But first, I want you to tell me something. Do you remember anything about when you were a baby, about your family?" She shook her head, swinging her short legs that didn't reach the ground. "I don't remember much from before I lived on the street. I just remember that there was a lady who sometimes took care of me, but she left when I was very little. And I remember that I always thought my mom was going to come back to get me, you know. But the auntie at the shelter said that's something kids make up so they won't be sad. What if I told you that your mother didn't abandon you, that she died when you were still a baby, and that's why you went to the shelter?" Her eyes widened. "My mom died? Really died. Really died. In an accident. So she didn't leave me because I was a bad kid?" The question hit him like a stab. "You were never a bad kid. Never." Your mother loved you very much, so much that she chose your name thinking about something very special to her. I have a real name." He opened the file and took out a copy of the birth certificate. "Your name is Helena, like the doll your mother loved most when she was little." "Helena," she repeated slowly, as if she were trying out the sound. "It's pretty. Can I use it again?" "You can use it always. It's yours." Helena was silent for a long time, processing the information. Then she asked in a small voice, "And my dad, did he die too?" "No, your dad is alive, but he left before you were born. Not your fault," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "Sometimes adults make bad choices when they get scared. And I don't have anyone else. No grandpa, no grandma." He took a deep breath. It was the moment of truth. "Actually, you have a grandfather, and he's been looking for you for a long time." "Really?" Her eyes shone with a hope that he hadn't seen for weeks. "Is he going to want to meet me?" "He already knows you, Helena." "What do you mean?" "I'm your grandfather." The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Helena stared at him with an expression that mixed confusion, disbelief, and a hope so fragile that he feared it would break at the slightest movement. "Are you serious?" she whispered. "Completely serious." He showed her the DNA test results, explaining in simple terms what it meant. "Your mother was my daughter. She died in an accident when you were still in her belly. You are my granddaughter, Helena. My family." Tears began to run down the girl's face, but this time they weren't tears of pain or fear. They were tears of relief, of discovery, of a joy so pure that it made his heart ache. "So you're not going to abandon me? Ever?" "Never. You are my family." "You always were my family, I just didn't know. And can I live with you? For real? If you want to." Helena didn't answer with words. She simply threw herself into his arms with a force that almost knocked them off the bench. She cried and laughed at the same time, clinging to him as if she feared he would disappear. "I always knew," she sobbed against his chest. "I always knew there was someone somewhere who would love me." "I knew it." He hugged her back, feeling decades of pain and loneliness dissolving in that moment. "I love you, Helena, from the first day I saw you." "I love you too, Grandpa." "Grandpa." The words sounded like music, but the joy of the moment was interrupted by the arrival of the shelter director, accompanied by two men in suits he didn't recognize. "Sir, I need to speak with you," she said, with an expression he couldn't interpret. "In private." Helena clutched his arm tighter. "Don't leave me, Grandpa." "I won't leave you," he promised, but something in the director's gaze made him apprehensive. In the director's office, he discovered that the two men were lawyers representing a child protection organization that had decided to question his suitability to stay with Helena. "Sir, we've received some concerning reports," said one of the lawyers. "There are allegations that you are using your financial influence to manipulate the adoption system. There are also questions about the suitability of a single man raising a girl alone. Reports from whom?" "That's confidential, but we are obligated to investigate." "He's my grandpa." Helena had appeared at the office door, completely ignoring the rules about children not being allowed to hear adult conversations. "He's my real family." "Helena, go back to the courtyard," the director ordered. "No!" The girl ran to him. "You can't separate us." "He's my grandpa." One of the lawyers looked at Helena with an expression that mixed pity and skepticism. "Girl, do you understand that adults sometimes say things that aren't true to get what they want?" "He's not lying," Helena screamed with a fury that surprised everyone. "You're all lying. You say you want what's best for me, but you only want to send me away. He's the only one who has never lied to me." "Helena, no!" She turned to the millionaire with tears in her eyes. "Grandpa, they're going to take me away from you, aren't they?" He knelt in front of her, holding her small hands. "No one is going to separate us, Helena. I promise." "Sir," interrupted the lawyer, "you can't make promises that you may not be able to keep. The legal process." The legal process will prove that she's my granddaughter and that I have every right to raise her." His voice carried a deadly chill. "And if anyone tries to stop me, I will use every penny I have to destroy whoever is behind these anonymous reports. Sir, threats won't help your cause." "It's not a threat. It's a promise." That night, Helena had to stay at the shelter while he went home to prepare for a legal battle that he knew would be brutal. But for the first time in 3 years, he didn't feel alone. He had a family to protect, and he would do anything to keep her safe. The days that followed were the most intense in the millionaire's life since the death of his wife and daughter. He transformed his office into a war operations center, gathering the most competent legal team in the country to fight for Helena's custody. He quickly discovered that the forces working against him were more powerful and organized than he had imagined. The anonymous reports came from a network of influences that included other members of the board of his own restaurant, psychologists paid by conservative organizations, and even politicians who considered his sudden parenthood an opportunity to gain points with the electorate by attacking rich people's privileges. "They are claiming that you are going through a psychological crisis," explained his lead lawyer during a meeting that lasted until late at night. "They argue that the sudden discovery that you have a granddaughter has triggered obsessive and potentially dangerous behavior." Dangerous for whom? For the child. They allege that you may be projecting feelings related to the loss of your daughter onto her, creating a psychologically harmful dynamic. The millionaire clenched his fists. "And what is the opinion of the psychologists who actually evaluated me?" "They all attest to your mental sanity and suitability for parenthood. But the opposing psychologists never evaluated you personally. They base their conclusions solely on behavioral patterns observed from a distance. In other words, they are inventing a diagnosis." Basically, yes. But legally, this creates a complicated situation. The judge may decide that a prolonged observation period is necessary before granting definitive custody. How long? 6 months to a year. The idea of Helena spending another year in the shelter, believing that perhaps he would abandon her like everyone else, was unbearable. "There's another issue," continued the lawyer, clearly uncomfortable. "The shelter director is claiming that the girl has developed a sick attachment to you. She says that she refuses to participate in activities, doesn't eat properly when you're not there, and has nightmares about being separated from you. That's natural. She's spent her whole life being abandoned." "I agree, but they are using this as evidence that your relationship is harmful to her emotional development." "It's a perfect trap," the millionaire murmured. "If she doesn't care about me, they prove that we have no real bond. If she cares too much, they prove that the bond is unhealthy." Exactly. Meanwhile, at the shelter, Helena was living her own hell. The discovery that she was a millionaire's granddaughter had leaked to other children and staff, creating an atmosphere of resentment and isolation around her. "Now that you found out you're rich, you don't want to play with us anymore?" asked an older girl with the cruel tone that abandoned children sometimes develop. "I'm not rich," Helena replied, confused. "I'm the same as you." "No, you're not. Your grandpa has a lot of money. He's going to take you to live in a mansion and you're going to forget that we exist." "It's not true." But the words planted a seed of doubt in her mind. What if it was true? What if the love she felt for her grandfather was just gratitude for him being rich? What if he got tired of her when he found out what she was really like? A girl who didn't know how to behave in beautiful places, who didn't know the rules of the rich world. The shelter staff also changed their behavior towards her. Some treated her with a forced deference that made her uncomfortable. Others openly showed their resentment. "You don't have to obey the rules anymore?" asked a staff member when Helena refused to eat dinner for the 3rd night in a row. "Now that you have a millionaire grandfather, you think you can do what you want?" "I'm just not hungry," Helena whispered. "Of course. You must be expecting caviar, huh?" It was during one of these sleepless nights that she overheard a conversation between shelter staff that would change everything. "That man will give up on her in a few months," said a voice she recognized as the director's. "Men like him don't have the patience for troubled children. When he finds out that she wets the bed, that she has nightmares, that she doesn't know how to behave in fancy restaurants, he'll return her here faster than the other families did. And if he doesn't give up, he will. They always do. Especially when they realize how much work it takes to raise a traumatized child. He thinks that love is enough, but it isn't. This girl will need years of therapy, special education, infinite patience. Millionaires don't have time for that. Poor girl. It's better this way, better for her to learn soon that she can't trust anyone than to create expectations and get hurt even more." Helena heard every word with painful clarity. The next morning, when her grandfather arrived for his daily visit, she was waiting for him with a different expression. More closed off, more guarded. "Hi, Grandpa," she said, but her voice sounded mechanical. "Hi, my princess. How are you doing?" "Fine." She didn't run to hug him as she always did. She remained seated on the bench, playing with a twig she had found on the ground. He noticed the change immediately. "Helena, did something happen?" "No." "Are you sure? You seem sad." "I'm fine." She looked up at him, and what he saw there frightened him. It was the same look she had when he found her in the rain. Guarded, suspicious. "Grandpa, are you going to give me back when you find out that I wet the bed?" The question hit him like a punch. "Who told you that?" "No one. I just wanted to know. Helena, look me in the eyes." He knelt in front of her, forcing her to face him. "I will never give you back. Never. No matter what you do. No matter what problems you have. You are my granddaughter, my family. Families don't give up on each other." "But what if I don't know how to behave at your house? What if I break something expensive? What if I can't be a rich girl?" "You don't need to be a rich girl. You just need to be you. And I'm going to love you exactly as you are." For a moment, the protective mask she had built trembled, but then she put it back on. "Okay," she said, but he knew she wasn't really convinced. That night, he made a decision that would shock even his most experienced lawyers. "I want to speed up the process," he said during an emergency meeting. "Whatever the cost. Sir, if we push too hard, it may seem that we are trying to buy the court's decision. I'm not talking about buying anyone. I'm talking about using all available legal resources to get my granddaughter out of that place before they completely destroy her ability to trust. And if the judge denies, then we will appeal. And if they deny the appeal, we'll go to the appeals court. And if necessary, we'll go to the Supreme Court. That could take years. Then we better start now." He didn't know that Helena, that same night, had made a decision of her own. A decision born of the despair of a 5-year-old child who could no longer bear the uncertainty. She had decided to run away. Helena waited until everyone at the shelter was sound asleep. She had planned escapes before. She knew every window that didn't lock properly, every door that creaked, every staff member who slept heavily during the night shift. But this time was different. This time she wasn't running for the freedom of the streets. She was running from the pain of waiting for a happiness that might never come. In her 5-year-old mind, the logic was simple and devastating. If she disappeared, her grandfather wouldn't have to choose between staying with her or giving her up. He wouldn't have to find out that she wasn't worthy of her luxurious life. He wouldn't have to face the disappointment of realizing that he had bet on the wrong horse. With bare feet, she slipped silently through the dark corridors of the shelter. She was carrying only a small backpack with the clothes he had given her, the only thing of value she possessed. She left behind the books, the crayons, the small gifts he brought to each visit. If she was going away forever, she didn't want to remember how good it had been to dream of a family. The ground-floor bathroom window was her favorite escape route. Too small for an adult to pass, but perfect for a frail child. She had already used that exit other times, when the pain of being surrounded by people but still completely alone became unbearable. But as she was about to go through the window, she heard something that made her freeze. Voices coming from the director's office. Even though it was very late at night, there was movement inside. Curiosity overcame prudence. Helena crept to the ajar door and managed to hear fragments of a conversation that left her cold. Has to be tomorrow morning before he arrives for the visit. Judge signed the order. Immediate transfer. Another state. Impossible to trace. When he finds out, it will be too late. Helena didn't fully understand what they were planning, but she understood enough to know that she was in danger. They were going to take her away, to a place where her grandfather would never be able to find her. The terror she felt at that moment was unlike any fear she had ever experienced. It wasn't the fear of hunger, cold, or rejection. It was the fear of forever losing the only person who had shown her genuine love. She completely forgot about the escape plan. Now she had a much more important mission, to warn her grandfather. But how? She had no phone, didn't know his address, didn't know anyone who could help her. She was a 5-year-old child, alone in the middle of the night, trying to save the only relationship that mattered in her life. That's when she remembered the restaurant. He had mentioned during one of their conversations that he had been dining at the same restaurant every night for 3 years. That's where they had met. If she could get there, maybe she would find someone who knew how to contact him. The race through the dark streets of the city was the most terrifying of Helena's life. She knew the way. She had memorized the route during the few times he had taken her for a car ride. But walking those same streets alone, in the dark, with cars passing at high speed and strangers on the sidewalks, was terrifying. Her bare feet were cut by the rough asphalt. The cold morning air cut into her skin through the thin nightgown. Several times she had to hide in alleys or behind parked cars when she saw police patrols or people who looked dangerous. But she kept running. The restaurant was closed when she arrived, obviously. The lights were off, the doors locked, the chairs stacked on the tables. For a moment, despair almost overcame her. She had risked everything to get there and had no plan for what to do next. That's when she saw a light on in the upper floor of the building. Apartments. There must be apartments above the restaurant. Maybe someone there would know how to find her grandfather. Helena began to knock on the building's door. At first slowly, then with increasing desperation. She shouted for help from anyone who could hear her. She cried her grandfather's name until her voice was hoarse. It was the night porter who finally opened the door. An elderly man, looking sleepy and irritated. Girl, what the heck are you doing here alone at this hour? Please, sir, I need to talk to my grandfather. They're going to take me away tomorrow and I'll never see him again. Your grandfather? Kid, it's 2 in the morning. Go back home. I can't. My grandfather eats at the restaurant downstairs every day. He's very tall, has gray hair, and wears an expensive suit. Do you know him? The porter looked at her more closely. There was something in the description that sounded familiar to him. Wait a minute. Are you talking about the gentleman who always asks for the corner table? Yes! Helena almost screamed with relief. That's him. Do you know where he lives? I don't know, but wait a second. The man picked up a phone and dialed a number. Hey, John, sorry to bother you in the middle of the night, but there's a girl here looking for that customer who always dines alone. That's right, corner table. She says she's his granddaughter. The conversation continued for a few minutes while Helena bit her nails nervously. Finally, the porter hung up. John is the maitre d' at the restaurant. He has your grandfather's office number. He'll call there and leave a message on the answering machine. But girl, you can't stay out here on the street. It's dangerous. I can't go back to the shelter. They're going to take me away. Then stay here in the lobby until morning, but don't make any noise, okay? Helena agreed, huddling in an old chair in the lobby. The man brought her a blanket and a glass of water, showing a kindness she didn't expect. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, the millionaire was in his penthouse, working late into the night with his legal team. They were trying to find legal loopholes, precedents, anything that could speed up the custody process. He hadn't slept properly in days. It was at 3 in the morning that his secretary called, interrupting the meeting. "Sir, I'm sorry to bother you, but we received a strange message on the office answering machine. A restaurant maitre d' saying that your granddaughter is looking for you." His heart stopped. "What do you mean, looking for me?" "Apparently she showed up alone at the restaurant in the middle of the night, saying that they're going to take her away tomorrow." The maitre d' left the number of the lobby where she is. He didn't wait to hear anything more. He left the lawyers in the meeting room and ran to the elevator, calling the number the secretary had written down. "Hello? This is the girl's grandfather." "Oh, sir. She's here, sleeping in the chair. Poor thing, she arrived here desperate, saying they were going to take her away." "I'm coming to get her. Don't let her leave." The drive to the restaurant was the longest of his life. 1,000 scenarios went through his head. What if it was a trap? What if someone had hurt Helena? What if she was injured, traumatized, regretting having looked for him? When he arrived at the lobby and saw the small figure huddled in the chair, covered by an old blanket, he felt a mixture of relief and terror that almost made him faint. "Helena," he whispered, kneeling beside the chair. She opened her eyes immediately, as if she hadn't really been sleeping. When she saw him, her face lit up with an expression of relief so intense that he had to hold back the tears. "Grandpa, I knew you were going to come." She threw herself into his arms with a force that almost knocked them over. He held her tight, feeling his heart pounding against his chest. "Helena, what happened? Why did you run away?" "They're going to take me away tomorrow," she sobbed against his shoulder. "I heard them talking. They're going to send me to another state where you'll never find me." The fury he felt at that moment was more intense than any emotion he had ever experienced. Someone had planned to separate his granddaughter from him in secret, and she had risked her own life to warn him. "That's not going to happen," he said, with a conviction that surprised even himself. "I swear on everything holy, Helena, that's not going to happen." "But what if they succeed? What if they say you can't stay with me?" He held her small face in his hands, forcing her to look into his eyes. "Helena, do you trust me?" "I trust you." "Then listen to me carefully. No matter what happens, no matter what anyone says, no matter where they try to take you, I will find you, always. You are my family, and I will never stop fighting for you. Promise?" "Promise." He carried her to the car, wrapped in the lobby blanket. Throughout the journey to his penthouse, she didn't let go of his hand for a second. "Grandpa, can I sleep at your house tonight?" "You can sleep at my house forever if you want. Even if I wet the bed. Even if you wet the bed. Even if I break something expensive. Even if you break something expensive. Even if I don't know how to behave like a rich girl." "Helena," he stopped the car and turned to her. "You don't need to be a rich girl. You don't need to be anything other than what you already are. I don't love you for what you might become. I love you for what you already are." She was silent for a moment, processing the words. Then she asked, in a small voice, "And what am I?" "You're brave. You're kind even after everything you've been through. You're intelligent. You're strong. You're my granddaughter. And you're the most important person in the world to me." The tears that she had held back throughout the night finally began to fall. But this time they were tears of relief, of gratitude, of a love that she finally allowed herself to feel completely. In his penthouse, she took the first hot bath in a real bathtub of her life. She wore a soft robe that was too big, but that made her feel safe and protected. She had dinner, even though it was 4 in the morning, sitting at the formal dining table, using a fork and silver knife as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Is that how you always have dinner?" she asked, observing the table set with fine china and sparkling crystals. "Usually I eat alone. This is a lot more fun. Can I use this table always? This is your table now." When she finally fell asleep in the guest bed, which he had improvised with new sheets and extra pillows, he sat in the chair beside her, just watching her breathe. For the first time in 3 years, his house didn't look like an empty mausoleum. It looked like a home. But he knew the war was just beginning. When the shelter discovered that Helena had disappeared, when they knew she was with him, they would use that as evidence that he was a destabilizing influence in her life. It didn't matter. He had made a promise, and he would keep it no matter the cost. At 6 in the morning, he called his lawyer. "I want an emergency restraining order preventing any transfer of my granddaughter out of state. And I want it before 8 o'clock. Sir, that's almost impossible. Almost impossible isn't impossible. Mobilize all the contacts we have in the judiciary. Use all the favors we've accumulated over the years. And if anyone questions it, remind them of how many politicians and judges have received donations from my companies for their campaigns." Sir, that sounds dangerously close to... I'm not asking for anything illegal. I'm asking them to use the same speed they would use if it were their own child in danger. While the lawyers raced against time, he prepared breakfast for Helena. Pancakes, the only thing he knew how to cook with some competence, a skill he had learned to make surprises for his daughter when she was little. Helena woke up to the smell of cinnamon and melted butter. She appeared in the kitchen still in her robe, with tousled hair and a sleepy expression that made him smile. "Good morning, Princess. Good morning, Grandpa. I'm not dreaming, am I?" "You're not dreaming." She climbed onto a high chair to reach the counter and watched him serve the pancakes on a pretty plate. "Grandpa, what's going to happen today?" "Today we're going to fight to stay together, and we're going to win." "How do you know?" "Because you were brave enough to warn me about the danger. Because you trust me. And because real families don't give up on each other." He knelt in front of her, taking her small hands. "Helena, no matter what happens today, no matter who comes here or what they say, I want you to remember one thing. You are no longer alone. You are never going to be alone again. There's someone in the world who loves you more than life itself, and that someone is me. I love you too, Grandpa. More than anything in the whole wide world." At 8 o'clock in the morning, when the shelter staff discovered that Helena had disappeared, they found a team of lawyers waiting at the door with a court order and a writ of habeas corpus. The war had ended before it even began. 6 months later, Helena was sitting on the same bench in the courtyard where she used to wait alone for her grandfather's visits. But this time, she wasn't alone, and she wasn't waiting. She was visiting. Her clothes were pretty but simple, a blue dress with white shoes that she had chosen personally in a store where she could try on everything she wanted. Her hair was held back with a delicate tiara, and there was a sparkle in her eyes that hadn't existed 6 months ago. "Are you sure you want to do this?" asked her grandfather, sitting next to her on the familiar bench. "I'm sure," she replied, with a maturity surprising for a 5-year-old. "They need to know that it's possible." "Possible what?" "That real families exist, that sometimes dreams come true, that it's worth waiting and believing." He smiled, remembering how she had changed in the last few months. The frightened and distrustful girl who apologized for existing had become a confident, loving child, full of life. She still had occasional nightmares, still wet the bed when she was very nervous, still got scared by loud voices. But now she had someone to comfort her when the nightmares came, someone to change the sheets without complaining, someone to speak softly when she needed tranquility. The adaptation process hadn't been easy for either of them. He had needed to learn to be a father again, or rather a grandfather, after 3 years of emotional dormancy. There were nights when he didn't know how to deal with her panic attacks, days when he felt completely inadequate to take care of a traumatized child. But they had learned together. Therapy for her, therapy for him, therapy for both of them together. A carefully constructed routine that respected her fears while encouraging her to grow. Firm but loving limits. Infinite patience mixed with realistic expectations. The first month had been the most difficult. Helena had tested his limits constantly, hoping that he would give up when he found out how she really was. She had broken an expensive vase on purpose, thrown tantrums in front of important visitors, shouted that she hated him when he established a rule that she didn't like. And in each test, he had remained firm. He had cleaned up the broken vase without complaining, apologized to the visitors, and calmly explained that she was going through a period of adaptation, had held her during the tantrum until the tears of anger turned into tears of relief. "I'm not going away," he had repeated 1,000 times. "No matter what you do, I'm not going away." The turning point had come in the 3rd week, when Helena had woken up screaming from a particularly violent nightmare. She had dreamed that he was returning her to the shelter, saying that she was too problematic to deserve a family. When he ran into her room and found her huddled in bed, trembling and crying, something had definitely changed between them. "You're not going to send me away?" she had sobbed. "Never, even if I'm a bad kid." "You're not a bad kid. You're a hurt child, and families help each other heal." It had been the first night she had slept through the night without nightmares. Now, looking at her on the shelter bench, he could hardly believe the transformation. The fragile and frightened child had become a vibrant, curious girl, full of plans and dreams. "Grandpa, can I tell them about my room?" "You can tell them whatever you want." Her room had become her favorite project. Together, they had chosen every detail: wallpaper with butterflies, a castle-shaped bed, shelves full of books, a table for drawing, a special corner for the stuffed animals that he couldn't stop buying for her. But the part she loved most was the wall where all the drawings she made were stuck, drawings of the new family, her and her grandfather holding hands, the two of them eating pancakes, playing in the park, reading together on the sofa. It was a gallery of happiness that grew every day. And can I talk about school? You can. The private school where she now studied had been another achievement. On the first day, she had hidden behind his legs, terrified of being alone with strangers. But the teacher was special. A woman who worked specifically with children who had experienced trauma. And within a few weeks, Helena was eager to go to class every day. "The other kids in my class have moms and dads," she had commented one day, "but I have a grandpa, and that's even better because grandpas know more stories." He had laughed, but inside he felt a deep gratitude. She didn't see her situation as a lack, but as a special peculiarity. One of the shelter staff approached, smiling when she saw Helena. "Wow, how you've grown, and what a beautiful dress." "Thank you. My grandpa let me choose it myself at the store. And how is it living with him?" "It's the best place in the world," Helena replied without hesitation. "He makes pancakes for breakfast, reads me stories before bed, and when I have a nightmare, he stays with me until I'm not afraid anymore." "That's great. And what did you come here to do today?" "I came to talk to the girls who still live here. I want to tell them that real families exist." The staff member looked at the millionaire with an expression of respect that he rarely saw. "You've worked a miracle with her." "No," he corrected. "She worked a miracle on me." Helena spent the whole afternoon talking to the children at the shelter. She told them about her room, about school, about the trips she took with her grandfather on the weekends. But mainly, she told them about what it was like to have someone who loved her unconditionally. "At first, I was afraid he would give me back," she confessed to a group of girls who listened with fascinated attention, "because everyone always gave me back. But you know what he said, that real families don't give anyone back, and that he was going to love me even if I was difficult." "And were you difficult?" asked a younger girl. "I was. I broke an expensive vase, threw tantrums. I even said I hated him once, but he didn't get angry with me. He just said that he understood I was scared and that he was going to stay with me until I wasn't scared anymore." "And are you still scared?" Helena thought for a moment. "Sometimes, but now when I'm scared, I tell my grandpa and we talk about it. And then the fear gets smaller. a girl of about 7 years old, who had recently arrived at the shelter, asked in a low voice, "What if no one wants to adopt me?" "Someone will want to," Helena replied with conviction. "There are a lot of people out there looking for someone to love. Sometimes it takes a while for them to find us, but they will find us." "How do you know?" "Because my grandpa looked for me my whole life, only he didn't know I existed. And when he found me, it was like all the pieces of the puzzle fit into the right place." When it was time to leave, several children came to say goodbye to Helena. She hugged each one, promising to come back soon to tell more stories about her new life. In the car on the way home, she was quiet for a long time. "What are you thinking about, Princess?" "I'm thinking that I want to help other children like me when I grow up." "How so?" "I want to have a big house where children who don't have families can live until they find one. And I want to teach people who are afraid to adopt that children only need love and patience to heal." He smiled, not surprised. Helena had developed a natural empathy for other children in vulnerable situations and often asked to take toys and books to the shelter. "You know that means our house is always going to be full of children, right?" "Yes, I know. But a house full of happy children is better than an empty house, isn't it?" "Much better." When they got home, he helped her take off her shoes and change clothes. She chose her favorite pajamas, one with star designs that glowed in the dark, and they went to the kitchen to prepare dinner together. It was a ritual they had developed. He cooked, she helped, usually more hindering than helping, but he didn't mind. They talked about the day, made plans for the weekend, sometimes simply enjoyed the comfortable silence of those who felt at home. "Grandpa, can I ask you a question?" "Always." "Were you happy before you met me?" The question took him by surprise. He stopped stirring the pasta sauce and looked at her, who was sitting on the counter swinging her legs. "Why do you want to know that?" "Because I wasn't happy before I met you, and I wanted to know if you were sad too." He thought about the answer, wanting to be honest but appropriate for her age. "I thought I was happy," he finally said. "But I discovered that there's a difference between not being sad and really being happy. Before I met you, I wasn't sad, but I also wasn't really alive. And now? Now I'm more alive than I've ever been." She smiled, satisfied with the answer. "You know, Grandpa, I think we saved each other." He approached her and kissed her on the forehead. "I think you're right." That night, after Helena had fallen asleep, without nightmares, without fears, just the peaceful sleep of a child who knows she is loved, he stood for a few minutes watching her through the ajar door of the room. 6 months ago, he was a man dead inside, living according to numbers and contracts, with no real purpose other than to accumulate more wealth than he could ever spend. Today, he was the grandfather of an extraordinary girl who had brought meaning back to his existence. The restaurant where they met had been renovated and now also functioned as a welcoming center for children living on the streets. The sign on the door, as Helena had suggested, said, "No food denied to those who are hungry." He had created a foundation to support shelters and accelerate adoption processes. He had funded training programs for families interested in adopting older children. He had used his influence to change laws that made it difficult for single people to adopt. But all this was just a consequence. The real miracle was what happened every day in his house. A girl who had forgotten her own name now sang her real name while playing. A child who apologized for existing now ran around the house shouting for joy. A girl who thought she didn't deserve love now fell asleep every night knowing she was completely loved. And a man who had given up on feeling anything now discovered new ways to love every day. Before going to sleep, as he did every night, he went to her room one more time. Helena was sleeping soundly, hugging the teddy bear she had received on her first day at home. "Thank you," he whispered, not knowing exactly who he was thanking. Perhaps to fate, perhaps to his deceased daughter, perhaps simply to the universe that had conspired for that lost girl to find her way to him. "Thank you for bringing me back to life. In the next room, Helena was murmuring something in her sleep. He approached to listen better and smiled when he realized what she was saying. Grandpa, pancakes, family, forever. They were the dreams of a child who had finally found her place in the world, and of a man who had rediscovered the true meaning of the word home. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to receive new stories every day. What would you do in the millionaire's place? Comment below and share this story with someone special who needs to believe that true families can be found in the most unexpected places.